Hello everyone! Welcome to Song Sparrow Paper Crafts. If we haven't met before, my name is Susan Fox Bowen and I am an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Welcome to another episode of Terrific Tuesdays, where we are going to make at least 3 projects together using some of the latest products from Stampin' Up! So let's see what today's episode is all about. This week's featured bundle is the Magical Meadow bundle. It includes a cling stamp set as well as a set of coordinating dies. This can be found on pages 36 and 37 of the Holiday Mini Catalog. This bundle is currently a part of the Stampin' Up! Seasonal Clearance Sale. This is also a part of a larger suite called Winter Meadow, which includes 12 by 12 designer series paper called Winter Meadow and a specialty paper called Snowflake Magic. Unfortunately, Snowflake Magic is sold out. However, you still are able to get the Winter Meadow 12 by 12 paper, and we will be using both as a part of today's designs. So let's take a quick look at the 3 projects that we'll be making together today. Let's take a quick look at this week's projects. We have 3 beautiful winter cards that utilize the stamps, dies, as well as designer series paper. If you are interested in receiving the kit to go for this week's projects for free, simply place a minimum $40 order in my online store, excluding tax and shipping, utilizing this week's host code, which is on the screen below, as well as in the description to this video. Your kit to go will contain all of the raw ingredients necessary to put these projects together, as well as detailed instructions. The host code will remain open through December 18th at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. If you happen to place an order of $150 or greater, do not use the host code because I want you to receive your free Stampin' Up! Product, and I will still send you the kit to go for free. So let's get started making this week's projects. Our first project is this beautiful card that utilizes the Snowflake Magic specialty paper. If you get this week's kit to go, your kit will include the Pretty Peacock cardstock base, a piece of basic white cardstock, which is the center panel, a strip of the Snowflake Magic specialty paper, as well as some smaller pieces of Pretty Peacock, Lost Lagoon, and shaded spruce cardstock for the evergreen spray at the top of the panel, and it will also include a little strip of silver trim for the bow for the evergreen spray. So let's get started on today's card. I did a little short cutting, pun intended. I did a little pre-cutting to make our assembly a bit quicker today. So we'll prepare our card base here. We'll just burnish in the center. I'm going to set it aside. I'm going to take my white cardstock here, and I have pre-cut my Snowflake Magic specialty paper, and these are 1.5 inch squares. I'm going to kind of lay them out a little bit here, and I like to try to line up the snowflakes in some way, if I can, so that at least some portion of a snowflake meets together. The idea behind this design is that this is supposed to resemble a window pane. So give us our little crisscross in the middle here. And so I wanted at least some of our snowflakes to kind of meet together to make it look like they belong together. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere these little pieces. They are going to go directly on the white cardstock. I'm going to use my silicone mat here, just to be sure that I don't get my sticky everywhere. So I'm going to get all of these sticky really quickly, and then I will match them back up. My sticky does not want to cooperate today. Some days are like that, aren't they? All right. Now, we've got those all sticky. All right. So I want about, I don't know, that one is not going to be centered unless I make the window pane a little bit bigger, which I think I will. Just since I don't want to ruin my white cardstock there, I made a little bit of a boo-boo, but we'll just work with it. I'll just make our window pane here a little larger than I did on our sample card. Oop. All right, so we have those adhered to our white cardstock. Again, these were 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch squares of that Snowflake Magic specialty paper, and this will be included in the kit to go. All right, so I took a little shortcut and I went ahead and die cut our evergreen branches from our cardstock. I used the mistletoe die to cut the shaded spruce pieces. I used what I like to call the cattail die to cut the pretty peacock. And I utilized the fir die to cut the Lost Lagoon. You'll notice that they're a little shorter than the original die. I snipped off the ends because we're going to build that spray of evergreen here at the top of our window pane. And so let's do that really quickly here. I believe I would like to start with the shaded spruce on the bottom. And then I'm going to put my Lost Lagoon. You can do this in whichever order you would prefer. This is just me kind of laying it out here. I think I want that to hang down a bit more on that side, and I think I might hang it up on this side. Okay, so I'm going to use glue dots to put my little layers together here. And I will show you a little trick on the bottom in a moment. Now, sometimes getting the glue dot to adhere to this without tearing the die is a little tricky, so you can always use a poker tool if it doesn't want to cooperate with you. And I'm going to kind of leave this on the top as I pick up this other piece, just so that I get the width right. Again, I'm going to pick up a glue dot because I'm going to adhere each of these little sprigs together. Lay that there, pick that one up there. Pick up another glue dot. Get my next two here. All right, I will need another glue dot there. Oops. All right, so to make it a little easier to adhere onto the top up here and give it a bit more of a base, I am using my 1/4 inch punch, which is roughly the same size of a standard hole punch, single hole punch, through some white cardstock, and I'm just going to place this on the back. Just gives me a bit more solid base to kind of play around with here. I'm ultimately going to put a glue dot on that. And I'm going to adhere it in the center of the window pane. And it's okay for there to be a little bit of an overhang at the top. We can double check that really quickly here. Yep, that looks fine. I'm not going to adhere this panel yet. I have already tied a small bow out of my silver trim here. I am sparing you having to watch me do this on film because I am very terrible at bows. It takes me forever. It was probably about 5 minutes worth of work here. So I am getting better, but I really didn't want to torture you all with having to watch me struggle with the trim. And I'm just going to place that here in the center, see how that's going to cover up the messy portion of our overlapping branches there. I am going to set my card base aside here for a moment, and we are going to stamp our sentiment, which I chose from the Magical Meadow stamp set. I have picked this sentiment here, "May this season of sparkle bring joy and delight." We're going to stamp it in the center underneath our window pane. I'm using Pretty Peacock ink. So I'll ink this up here. I prefer to ink my stamp with my Stampin' Spot. I like to use those on videos because they're easier to maneuver. But I like to apply the ink to the stamp instead of stamping, getting the ink on the ink pad this way. I just find that I do a little bit better getting an even application and not over inking my stamp that way. Going to do my best to stamp this straight. There in the center at the bottom, that is perfect. So we are going to pop up our focal panel here on dimensionals. So I'm going to turn it over here and apply some dimensionals to the back really quickly. You maybe remembered me mentioning on last week's video that I am attempting to use up some really old dimensionals that I have in my stash. I much prefer the Stampin' Up! Dimensionals, the little hexagons. But I don't see a reason not to go ahead and use up what I already have at the moment. So that's what we're doing. I like to make sure that my panel has good coverage so I don't have any sagging portions whenever I adhere it to my card base. We'll remove our adhesive backings now. That one did not want to come off. All right. All right, we want to have an even as we can get border all the way around of our card base. And to finish off our card, I would like to add some of these adhesive backed sequins. You could use any embellishment that you happen to have on hand. Maybe you have, these are glitter sequins, but maybe you happen to have some silver sequins. Those would look really nice here. I mean, just anything that you have on hand to add a little additional sparkle to the sentiment. And this is project number 1, all complete. So let's move on to our second project. All right, now let's get started on our second project. Our second project utilizes stamps, dies, and designer series paper from our Magical Meadow bundle of products. And if you get this week's kit to go, what you will receive in your kit will be the balmy blue cardstock for the card base, a pre-cut piece of the Winter Meadow designer series paper, pieces of Pretty Peacock and Lost Lagoon cardstock for the evergreen pieces that go behind the sentiment panel, and you will receive a pre-cut die cut element for your sentiment in the center. You'll also get a strip of the silver and white sheer ribbon that will go behind the sentiment panel. So let's get started on our card design. Going to go ahead and fold our card base here, but I am going to set it aside for a moment. So I have already die cut the pieces, the evergreens that are going to go behind our sentiment panel. I die cut the fur out of Lost Lagoon. Let's see if you can see that if I do that right here. Using the fur die here. And then the holly leaves are cut from Pretty Peacock with our little holly leaf die here. So just trying to shortcut us a little bit of time. I am going to set that aside with my paper. I am going to stamp our sentiment and then die cut it here. I'm using the Winter Wishes stamp from the Magical Meadow set. I'm going to stamp this in Pretty Peacock ink. On the smoky sheet, which on the reverse side is blue trees, but I'm going to stamp this on my smoky sheet of paper here, and then I'm going to die cut it. A little bit of magic. So our sentiment panel is die cut using this little frame, and this comes from the Autumn Leaves die set, which is why I will be providing that in the free kit to go this week. All right, so now we want to build our panel here, our sentiment section in the middle. I really like how when we offset our branches here, that they go opposing directions. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to check those with my sentiment panel here. And I like the placement. I'm going to use some tear and tape to hold these down because I know that my tear and tape is going to be covered with my sentiment panel. And that ensures that those aren't going to go anywhere. Now on my original demo card, you'll notice that I had the holly underneath. Here I stamped my sentiment a little bit lower. And so I'm going to change it up just a smidge. And for this particular design, I'm actually going to put the holly in 2 places. I'm going to put this corner, but then I'm going to place the ones on the bottom down here underneath. At least that's what I think I'm going to do. We're going to design this little difference on the fly. How about that? You can kind of see a design idea come to fruition here. Yeah, I think I like that. We can look and see what it looks like underneath. How about that? Just for comparison's sake. I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to do one underneath and I'm going to do one on top. I'm going to use a glue dot on the bottom of the one I'm going to put on my sentiment panel. Actually, I'll just use glue dots on all of them. Makes it nice and simple. Some of it is picturing in your mind's eye where it was so you can put it back. And I am better at that sometimes versus others. I don't know about you. And if I'm not quite sure, I'll come back to it before I stick it down. All right. I am going to put my sentiment on dimensionals. I am not going to stick that quite yet because I want to place my ribbon, my twist of ribbon underneath. I am going to go ahead and take the backing off of that tear and tape that I put under there because I'm going to use it to hold my ribbon down. All right. I'm going to scope this out really quickly, make sure it looks okay. I'm going to pull this ribbon over just a smidge so that I don't cover up all of my ivy there. Yeah, or holly leaves rather. I said ivy. I didn't mean ivy, I meant holly. All right, so that looks good. Just to be sure that my ribbon doesn't come undone, I'm going to put a little piece of tear and tape over it. Go ahead and remove the backing if you want to, or you can leave it on there. I do, just in case I happen to put it in a spot where it might be visible. Every once in a while I mess that up. Very good. So now we have our center section, and I'm also going to pop up our panel once again on the back of the card. So we'll place our dimensionals on the back of this panel, of our focal panel here. Again, I like to make sure I have really good coverage with my dimensionals so that I don't have any sagging portions once I get it affixed to my card back. We'll remove our backing on these now so that we can get this affixed to our card back. All right, got those removed. We want an even border, as even as we can get all the way around. Should be roughly a quarter, and no, not a quarter, an eighth of an inch. And I'm going to finish this design off as well with my glitter sequins. Again, anything that you might have on hand, you could use to add a bit of sparkle and kind of draw the eye across the design here. I'm using an odd number, but I leave that to you, whatever you think looks the best. But here we are. Here's our second design using our Magical Meadow bundle. A slight variation here on the placement of the holly leaves. That's the beauty of making cards, is you can kind of change it up as you go, especially if you have a little oopsie in your stamping or die cutting and it doesn't look like an oopsie when all is said and done. So let's move on to our third design. Now for our third and final design for this week's set of cards. This design is almost 100% stamping. If you receive this week's kit to go, what you will get will be the pretty peacock card base. You will receive white cardstock for the image panel. You will receive a pre-cut sentiment panel, and you will receive a pre-cut soft shimmer matte for the sentiment. And you will also receive a strip of ribbon, which will either be this iridescent trim or the silver and white trim. It might vary. So let's go ahead and get started with today's card. I'm going to set aside the other products that I don't need right now, and we are going to work on our image panel here. And so our image panel is 100% stamping, utilizing the Magical Meadow stamps. And I'm going to start with the, I don't know if you can see this, it's kind of like fur with berries. It's almost like a cedar tree branch. And I'm going to ink it up really well with my pretty peacock ink. And I'm doing my panel in kind of sets of 2. You can do yours however you wish as far as the repeating pattern goes. That's really up to you. It's just the way I happen to do this. And I kind of tried to keep my images in line with one another. All right, now I'm going to move on to this string of evergreen branches. And for that, I'm going to use Lost Lagoon. I'm going to do this in the corner here. And these are my bigger stamps. So they're the ones that I'm stamping in pairs. I'm going to make a bit more of this be visible on the bottom than on the top. Gonna have it kind of come up to the center here, like so. I'll set that aside. The next image I'm going to use is the fan-shaped evergreen here, and I'm going to use Pool Party as the ink for this one. again, on this other side, I'm gonna have a bit more of my image showing. So I've kind of got large and small as far as how my stamped images are going on to my white cardstock here. Now, on my sample, you might have noticed that my berry image, which is what we will be stamping next, looks a little shimmery here, and I chose to stamp my sample in a metallic ink. But for our video today, we're going to use smoky slate instead. I think it will give us the same effect, just without having to wait on that metallic ink to dry, or dry it with a heat gun. So we'll fill in our, around the edges where I've left blank spots, we're going to fill in with our berries here. Been told these are blueberries. I'm no expert. I'll take their word for it. So we'll just fill in here, making sure I had the berry end of the stamp up. And I'm just moving all the way around my panel, filling in with my berries. And I'm going to finish off with this corner over here. Like so. All right, we can set aside our scrap piece of paper here. In our sample, underneath the sentiment panel, I wanted a bit of just soft shimmer. So what I did was take my shimmery ribbon, silver and white sheer ribbon, and I kind of made a I wrapped it around 3 times because I wanted to be sure I got good coverage from where my sentiment panel will be. And I'll be able to overlap that in a moment. I'm going to cut a little bit extra. I'm not going to adhere that just yet because I want to go ahead and get my die cut panels in place. Let me set my ribbon aside here. So I'm going to set this ribbon and my stamped panel to the side, and let's bring our die cut elements out. So I've die cut my soft shimmer paper. This happens to be the Pretty Peacock, as well as my white cardstock with my sentiment from the set. I used the autumn leaves frames in order to do this, and of course I will provide those die cut pieces in the kit to go this week, since they are not included in the Winter Meadow bundle. So just to get a feel for where I want my ribbon to end up, I am going to go ahead and just be ready with my tear and tape on the back. So I know that I want to layer, I'm going to layer my dies, my die cut pieces, and I'm going to put this a bit lower than what I did in my original because I want to be sure that I leave room for my bow that I'm going to affix to the top. So I'm going to do it a little differently than I did in the demo card just to be sure that I have a little bit of extra room for the ends of that ribbon. All right, so I want to get a feel for where I want my sheer ribbon to be here. Apparently this is the day where my fingers do not really want to cooperate. Let's see how that looks. If that's roughly the spot where we want it, because I kind of want it to be centered, but I do want to overlap it just a little bit more, perhaps, to be sure I've got some shimmer that goes of the die cut piece that goes on either side of my ribbon. So that was a fairly good starting place for that. I am going to use my tear and tape to hold down that end. For right this second, I will not remove that backing. I will in just a moment. I have found once I have one end affixed, I can kind of turn my panel over and over, you noticed. And I'll be able to slide that up and down a little bit here. Before I get it affixed. Yes, that will be good. All right. I'm going to proceed now, removing backing, just one little piece at a time here. Hopefully you can see this process as I go. It just helps hold down my ribbon. Be careful not to stick that to my paper here. All right. Yes, that's going to be perfect. All right, I am going to use dimensionals on the back of my sentiment panel. Remove my backing here. I missed that one. All right. Like so. Perfect. I'm going to use a glue dot to adhere my ribbon. This is the iridescent ribbon that I've tied in a bow. Again, I have spared you watching me struggle with the bow tying. Although I will say that the iridescent ribbon, for me, is much easier to tie in a bow. All right, we are going to apply dimensionals to the back of our panel to adhere to our card base. So let's apply our dimensionals. As I've said before, I like to be sure I get really good coverage so I don't have any portions that sag. So spare no dimensional, leave no part uncovered. Just to be sure that all of our portions of our image panel here stand up nicely on our card base. We'll remove our backings. Sometimes they come off a bit more easily than others. All right, flip it over here. An even border all the way around, and wouldn't you know it, but I did not cut down my base. Well, stand by for just one moment while I fix my little boo-boo here. You know, it's never a dull moment, is it? So, top to bottom, we will make our edges be equal. Side to side, it's going to go edge to edge rather than having a border all the way around. But that's fine. It's a little different than our demo card. So here we are almost done. We're going to add just a bit of extra sparkle using our glitter sequins again. Just gonna put a few here and one right there. Again, just draw your eye across the design with a little bit of sparkle. So here we have our completed card, just a tiny bit different than our demo. Just shows how you can fix mistakes on the fly. Well, I do thank you for joining me today for this episode of Terrific Tuesdays and our 3 beautiful card designs here. Again, if you are interested in this week's kit to go, be sure that you place a minimum $40 order in my online store no later than December the 18th at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. That will qualify you for this week's for this week's free kit to go by using the host code, which is here below as well as in the description to this video. And remember, if you place an order of $150 or more, do not use the host code. That way you are able to receive your free product from Stampin' Up, and you will still receive this week's free kit to go. Your kit to go will include all of the raw materials that you need to put these projects together, and it will also include the detailed instructions. So thank you for joining me this week. I look forward to bringing you some new designs next week. Until next time.